I always believed that respect isn't something you can demand, it's something people offer when your presence earns it. But life, as I would learn, has a way of testing your dignity in the most unexpected places. My name is Elena, and this is the story of the day I pretended to be poor just to meet the woman who would become my son's wife. It began 2 years ago, on a calm morning in early spring. My only son, Michael, called me with that nervous excitement that only love can stir in a man's voice. He said, "Mom, there's someone I want you to meet. She's everything I've ever prayed for." I smiled, a mother's smile, the kind that hides fear behind pride. Every mother prays for her son to find love, but we also pray he doesn't lose himself in it. Her name was Isabella, soft-spoken, graceful, the kind of girl whose presence filled a room without noise. But her family, that was another story entirely. They were well-known, socially powerful, and used to a life of refinement and status. I, too, had built a quiet empire of my own, real estate investments across cities, shares in corporations, and a reputation for philanthropy, but I had never been one to flaunt it. My wealth lived quietly, hidden behind the walls of modesty and peace. When Michael told Isabella's family about me, I sensed hesitation. He said they seemed a little concerned about my background. That phrase, "a little concerned," stayed in my chest like a stone. I knew what it meant. In their eyes, I was just an ordinary widow, living a simple life somewhere out of the limelight. That was when the idea came to me. I would meet them exactly as they imagined me. Not as the CEO of an investment firm, not as the woman who had rebuilt her life from ashes after losing her husband, but as a simple mother, gentle, quiet, dressed in humility. Michael didn't know my plan. I wanted to see with my own eyes who these people really were, beneath their polished words and expensive smiles. The day of the meeting came. I wore a faded floral dress, one I hadn't touched in years. I left my car, the sleek black sedan, parked blocks away, and took a taxi instead. I tied a scarf over my hair, carried an old handbag, and wore the plainest sandals I could find. As I stepped into their mansion, tall pillars, marble floors, golden chandeliers, I felt the weight of their eyes before a single word was spoken. Isabella greeted me first. She was genuinely warm, though I could tell she was nervous. Her mother, however, looked me over like she was examining something fragile and out of place. Her father shook my hand, polite but cold. We sat in their luxurious sitting room, the kind that looked too perfect to be lived in. The silence between their words was louder than their greetings. "Michael told us you live outside the city," Isabella's mother asked, crossing her legs delicately. "Yes," I said, smiling softly. "Just a small home. Nothing fancy." She gave a nod, slow, dismissive. Then she turned to her husband with a faint smirk, as if to say, "I told you so." The rest of the evening was a quiet performance. I watched them subtly measure every sentence I spoke, every gesture I made. They offered tea and biscuits, but treated me like charity. And when Michael stepped out briefly to take a call, I overheard Isabella's mother whisper to her husband, "At least she's harmless. Maybe her simplicity will keep her son humble." Her words stung, but I smiled, a smile no one could decode. When I left that evening, Isabella walked me to the gate and said softly, "I'm sorry for how my mother behaved." "She can be." I placed a hand on hers. "Don't apologize, my dear. Some lessons life will teach her on its own." That night, I sat in my room and thought deeply. Respect, I realized, isn't just about how people treat you when they know your worth, it's how they behave when they don't. So, I decided to let the act continue. Weeks later, they invited me again, this time for a small family dinner to discuss the marriage plans. I went, still wearing my modest clothes, still keeping my secret. Dinner was worse. They spoke about how their family name carried weight, how they would ensure Isabella married into a respectable home, how appearances mattered. I sat quietly, my fingers tracing the edge of my cup, listening. Then, midway through dinner, Isabella's mother said, "We're just hoping Michael will settle into a family that matches our class. You understand, Mrs. Elena?" Her tone was sweet, but her eyes were sharp. I looked up and smiled faintly. Yes, I understand. Inside, my heart burned, not from anger, but from disappointment. They had no idea that the simple woman sitting before them owned more assets than their entire estate. But I kept silent, because sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon. Days passed. The wedding preparations began. I was invited less often, and when I was, they barely acknowledged my presence. The bride's mother made decisions about everything: the venue, the guest list, even what I should wear to the ceremony. She once said to me, with that rehearsed smile, "Don't worry, Mrs. Elena, we'll take care of everything. You can just show up and bless the couple." Just show up. That phrase echoed in my heart. The mother who had raised Michael alone, through hunger, storms, and sleepless nights, was now reduced to someone who should simply show up. I almost laughed, but I stayed calm, because I knew storms often end with sunlight. Then came the moment that changed everything. A week before the wedding, Isabella's parents organized a pre-wedding dinner, a formal evening meant to introduce both families to their close friends. They booked one of the city's most expensive hotels for it. Michael called me, apologetic. "Mom, please don't feel pressured. It's a bit fancy, but I really want you there." I said gently, "Of course, my son. I wouldn't miss it for the world." But that night, I decided, the pretense had gone on long enough. It was time to show them who they had been underestimating all along. The evening of the dinner arrived. While everyone expected me to arrive quietly, in my old taxi and floral dress, I chose differently. A black luxury car stopped at the hotel entrance. The driver stepped out to open the door, and there I was. Not as poor Mrs. Elena, but as the woman the world once called the Iron Rose, a self-made entrepreneur who had built one of the most reputable property firms in the country. I wore a deep emerald gown, simple but striking. My hair was neatly styled, my accessories elegant but subtle. Nothing screamed wealth, yet everything whispered it. When I entered the hall, the chatter died. You could feel the shift, the confusion. Isabella's mother froze mid-sentence, her eyes widening. "Good evening," I said calmly, walking toward them. Her husband stammered, Mrs. Elena?" "Yes," I smiled. "Forgive me if I seem different tonight. I realized I hadn't properly introduced myself the first time we met." I turned to one of the guests, a man I recognized. "Mr. Grant, it's been a while. How's your real estate branch doing?" He gasped, recognizing me instantly. "Elena Moore? My God, I didn't know you were the Elena Moore." You could see the dawning realization spread like wildfire across the table. The simple widow they had pitied was a woman of influence, wealth, and class. Isabella's mother blinked rapidly, struggling to hide her embarrassment. "Oh, I didn't realize," she whispered. I smiled gently. "That's all right. Sometimes we see what we want to see." Then, with grace, I took my seat beside Isabella and held her hand. "You chose a wonderful woman, Michael," I said softly. "Her heart is pure, and that's what matters most." The rest of the evening went in silence, the kind of silence that humbles even the proudest hearts. After the dinner, Isabella came to my hotel room, tears in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me, Mom? Why did you let them treat you like that?" I smiled and brushed her cheek. "Because sometimes, my dear, people reveal who they truly are only when they think you have nothing to offer them." She cried and hugged me tightly. I could feel her sincerity, her shame, her relief. Later, Isabella's mother asked to see me privately. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Mrs. Elena, I owe you an apology. I misjudged you terribly." I looked at her, not with bitterness, but compassion. "Respect," I said, "should never depend on wealth. Today you're apologizing because of who I am in the world's eyes." But even if I had been truly poor, I would have deserved the same respect. She lowered her gaze, tears filling her eyes. "You're right," she said quietly. "And I'm ashamed of how I behaved." I nodded. We all learn, sometimes through humiliation. But what matters is what we do after we learn. The wedding day arrived soon after, simple, elegant, full of love. This time, Isabella's family treated me with genuine warmth. Not because of my status, but because they had seen the kind of person I truly was. As I watched my son and his bride exchange vows, I felt a calm peace wash over me. Life had come full circle. I thought of my late husband, how we had once struggled to pay rent, how I had cried in the dark, unsure how to raise Michael alone. And now, here I was, respected, fulfilled, and wiser. When the couple finished their vows, I stood to speak. My voice trembled with emotion. "I've learned something through this journey," I said to the guests. "That true respect cannot be bought, it must be earned. And sometimes, life hides the greatest treasures inside the humblest appearances. Be careful how you treat people when you think they have nothing, because one day, you might discover they had everything." There was silence, then applause. Even Isabella's mother wept openly, her pride finally melting away. Later that evening, as the stars glimmered outside the reception hall, I stood by the balcony and whispered a prayer of gratitude. Not for the wealth, not for the reputation, but for the wisdom. Because humility is not weakness, it is power wrapped in grace. And sometimes, pretending to be small is the only way to reveal how small others truly are. I smiled and took a deep breath. That night, as music filled the air and laughter danced around me, I realized something profound. True respect is never demanded. It is earned, in silence, through patience, through the quiet dignity of those who know their worth but don't need to prove it. So, if you ever find yourself underestimated, don't rush to prove your value. Just watch, wait, and let time reveal who's truly rich, not in money, but in character. Because in the end, it isn't titles or wealth that make us great. It's how we treat those we think are beneath us. That's where true nobility lives. And that was how pretending to be poor taught an entire family the meaning of respect.